into the room, but also welcome if you're joining us online. So my name's Gara Vivati. Going to spend the evening together and looking at meditation, but particularly looking at a particular aspect of meditation and a particular aspect of practice. So we're on week 3 of the meditation challenge, and over the course of the meditation challenge, we've been looking at a particular system of meditation practice. So I'm going to recap where we've got to so far, and then I'm going to introduce the sort of next stage of this system of practice, and we'll look at how that is relevant to our lives and to our meditation. I mean, meditation is within life, so it's both applicable. But what we'll do to start with is we'll have a period of lying down like we did last week, because it's just always really nice to lie down, isn't it? Well, for some. So yeah, let's lie down with our heads in the direction of the door and the feet in this direction. And if you want to stay sitting, that's absolutely fine. But if you want to lie down. And it's nice to have your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor, and just shuffle around if you need to. You can come a bit closer to the shrine. And have a slim cushion under your head rather than a thick one. And feel free to angle your body a little bit if you need to. And if you're at home, you can lie down as well. So yeah, have your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor. And like I said, it's fine to stay sitting if you're more comfortable sitting. But I'll lead the practice through the body as if you're lying down. So if you're sitting, you can just make the relevant adjustment within your own mind. So just letting your body just settle down. And what we're going to be looking at tonight in the meditation practice is how to let go more deeply. And a lying down practice can be a really good preparation for that, because often when you're in a lying down position, your body can let go more fully than when you're sitting upright. And there's always deeper and deeper levels of letting go. And we find that through our lives, we find it through the mind, the heart, and we can find it through the body as well. So as you let your body rest on the ground, just see if you can release a bit more the bones. Often we're sort of gripping and holding our body against gravity. And you don't need to do that just now. You can just let your bones be heavy. You can let your head rest heavy on the cushion. And just notice how when you let the head be heavy, the muscles of the neck can relax. Let your shoulders release. And particularly on your exhalation, just imagine your shoulder blades sinking down into the ground beneath you. And as you let your shoulders release, just notice how it creates more spaciousness and more opening and softening across your chest. You can let your elbows release down and let your hands soften. And bring your attention to the back of your body and just sensing into your back, the whole length of your back. And as you breathe out, just imagine all the muscles of the back releasing. And as you breathe in, a sense of spaciousness across the back. And just feel the back of the pelvis on the ground. And imagine the pelvis heavy and releasing down. Let the lower back be open and let your belly be soft. And then bring your attention to your thighs and just notice if you're gripping through the thighs. And if it feels a bit hard to let the legs relax, you can take your feet a bit wider and let your knees come together, touching in the middle. And see if you can just release any holding through the legs. And then feel your feet in contact with the ground. And see if you can take your breath to your feet. It's as if your feet are just filling up with awareness. now bring the attention to your lower belly and just feeling your breath down in your lower belly. Noticing that gentle rise and fall of the belly with the breath. And not needing to change the breath, but just feeling the body being breathed. And opening in a sense of spaciousness as you breathe in, and a release and a letting go as you breathe out. And in a moment I'll ring the bell to mark the end of the practice, and when I ring the bell you can just take your time rolling over onto one side, and we can all roll in the same direction, so you can roll towards the Buddha and then you can just come up to sitting. Good. Okay, so I'll say a little bit about sort of where we are in terms of the meditation teaching that we've been doing over the last 2 weeks. So don't worry if you're joining us for the first time this evening in terms of this series. Hopefully it will all make sense. So we've been looking at the system of practice, the system of meditation. And it's a system of meditation practice, but it's also a system in terms of how to live your life, so that you can, in a way, actually step onto the path of transformation, step on to the path of practicing Buddhism. So the first step is to become whole, to integrate, and to integrate around something that can hold all of your energies and hold your deepest values. So you're sort of gathering your attention around, in a way, around reality. You're gathering your attention around your breath. So when we do the mindfulness of breathing practice, that's a practice of integration and concentration. We're training our minds to pay attention, and we're training in becoming whole. It's the antidote to sort of living on the surface of ourselves. It's the opposite of having all of the tabs on your computer open and your phone next to you and the radio on in the background, yeah? You're trying to see if you can gather all of your energy and focus on one thing that's of value. And in a way, I guess when we do the mindfulness of breathing, we might not feel like the breath is of value, but it can teach us something about the nature of reality. It's constantly changing. It's the first thing we do when we're born and the last thing we do before we die. It connects us with all of humanity. It's deeply mysterious. We don't need to think to breathe, but we can also think to breathe more deeply. We can sort of alter the breath, but it happens naturally. So there's something sort of poetic and beautiful about the breath. So sort of day to day, you're trying to integrate around your present experience. And we talk about that in terms of trying to be quite embodied and stay in touch with the body. So the breath is an immediate bodily experience. It's not an abstraction from your experience. So it's a good thing to integrate around. So in terms of meditation practice, that's the practice of integration, the mindfulness of breathing practice. And in terms of the rest of our lives, it's the practice of trying to do one thing at a time, the great art of doing one thing at a time, or the great art of doing nothing, literally just doing nothing. That's a really integrating practice, so sort of counter habitual. And I'll say a bit more about that in relation to the theme tonight about letting go. So yeah, we cultivate sort of gathering ourselves up, all the disparate parts of ourselves, we draw them together so that we're a whole person. And part of that is getting to know ourselves, getting to know our habits, getting to know our conditioning, getting to know our strengths and our weaknesses, becoming aware of them and not trying to push them out, you know? So we gather up all of ourselves right as we are this moment, unenlightened, bit messy in places, really messy in other places, really like majestic in other places as well. So we become aware of all of that. When we have that sense of wholeness and integration, what arises on the basis of that is positive emotion. So the second stage of this sort of system of practice is positive emotion. So it's integration and then positive emotion. And positive emotion will arise in dependence of integration. So when you get absorbed and concentrated, you naturally feel relaxed. You naturally feel a sense of meaning. You naturally feel actually a bit happy and settled. So on the basis of integration, positive emotion will arise. And you can also cultivate positive emotion, and that has an integrating effect. So they feed into each other. It's like a positive feedback loop. So when you do the metta bhavana, and you're cultivating positive states of mind, skillful intentions, even if you don't feel very positive or feel very skillful, you're trying to shape your mind in the direction of something skillful, something where you're wishing yourself well, you're wishing other beings well, you're recalling the human condition, you're trying to connect to all of humanity in a positive relationship, a sort of loving, other regarding relationship. That is a really integrating thing to do, because when we're in a state of contraction and aversion, it disintegrates our being. You know what it's like when someone is annoying you, or when I want to like avoid someone. It's actually like a active process of disintegration, because there's something happening in my experience and I don't want it. I have this thing of like trying to like slide right to the back of my being if someone's next to me and I don't really want to talk to them, hoping that I can get further away from them without actually stepping away, you know, and that's disintegrating. I'm trying to avoid what I don't want, yeah, and it can be in the form of another person, it can be in the form of an event, it can be in the form of, I don't know, the weather. Like the weather's a bit grim, right? Maybe some people love it, but it's like, but it's there, and when we're trying to avoid it, it has a disintegrating effect, and it well, from a bigger perspective, it's not in line with reality, because in reality, pleasure and pain comes and goes. Getting things and losing things is part of being human, and we can have this delusion that if we try really hard, then we're going to make life work on our own terms. So part of integration and positive emotion is growing up and realising that you can only have life on life's terms. You're never going to get life on your terms. Like you might do by chance sometimes, and it's not saying that you can't affect positive change. That's why we're practicing integration and positive emotion, because you're in the best chance to respond to life as life unfolds. But you know what it's like you get everything all lined up and then suddenly something goes wrong, or it lasts for a little while and then something slips. Or everything's going really well and then you're really anxious because you're like, it's going really well, when's it all going to go wrong? So you can't even really enjoy it. So you can get to a point where there's none of that. There's integration, positive emotion, and there's a letting go of wanting things to be the way that you want them to be. So I'm going to explore that a bit more in the second half. Yeah, but I just wanted to draw out those first two stages. So integration, positive emotion, and the next one is traditionally called spiritual death, but we've sort of termed it as letting go of limitations because it sounds less spiritual and deadly. But I actually really like the term spiritual death. And yeah, I'll unpack that a bit more. And spiritual death arises in dependence on integration and positive emotion. It's like once you're fully integrated and you're wholehearted and loving, it's like then you can die before you die. It's like then you can really let go of what holds you back. Then you can really see that you're creating a lot of your own suffering, and that's really hard to see. So you need to be quite whole and robust and resilient and positive to see your tendencies, and not just you, me as well. And it's a constant process. So Satchimanus was saying last week, it's not that we do integration, tick, do positive emotion, tick, and then we do spiritual death, tick. They co-arise and they move in, and we might have quite a strong spiritual death experience actually when we're not very integrated, and that can be quite shattering actually, because we don't know how to process it, we can't make sense of it. Or it, rather than it being a liberation, it feels like our lives sort of fallen apart. And quite a few people come to the Buddhist Center because they've had that kind of experience where we've put all our hopes into one particular area of our lives, like a relationship or our work or our families, and then obviously life unfolds and it falls, it sort of caves in on itself and it falls apart. And then what do we do? And in a way, all we can really do is work on our minds and work on our hearts so that we can face life on life's terms and live really, really fully and live in a way which is beautiful, bring beauty through our minds and our hearts into the world. And then we can really flourish actually. And in a way, when you live like that, it doesn't, as long as you're not being grossly unethical, it doesn't really matter what you do with your life, because life will have inherent meaning, because the inherent meaning will come from how you act in the world, what you think, what you say, what you do, the states of mind and the states of heart that you bring into the world, and then not holding on to them, not making them you, not you becoming this really super spiritual person who's really integrated and positive, but you unfolding constantly in response to the world as it unfolds. So what lies on the other side of spiritual death is this deep, deep interconnection with all of life. And in a way, that experience is sort of known and unknown to us. We don't know what's on the other side of spiritual death because you have to die in order to experience it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll say a little bit more about that in the second half. So I'll unpack a bit more about spiritual death, and then next week we'll talk more fully about spiritual rebirth. But it's quite hard to talk about one without the other. But I will. But before we do that, let's meditate. So we're sort of, at the Buddhist Center, we often do the meditation practice first, and then we do the Dharma teaching. And in a way, the meditation is cultivating that integration and that positive emotion. We're making our minds pliable to hear the truth, to see the truth, to experience it, to have an experience of it through our bodies, through our meditation, through our experience. Because, I can tell you all about integration and positive emotion and spiritual death, but until you have an experience of that, or you sort of recall that in your experience, it will just remain on the level of your intellect. So it's not until we have an actual experience of it that we really, really know it for ourselves, and that we can live from that place. So that's what we're doing here at the Buddhist Centre, is we're trying to live from these sort of concepts, and meditation is a really, really great way to explore that. So let's have a go at doing that. So we're going to do a period of the Metta Bhavana. So set yourselves up in meditation posture. And one of the main things to remember when you're doing the Metta Bhavana is it's about your sort of longing to be in loving relationship, and your intention to be in loving relationship. So you might not feel very loving, and it's not necessarily, the Metta Bhavana isn't necessarily about how you feel or cultivating like a warm, fuzzy feeling. It's really great if that arises. But that's not really the point of the practice. The point is to sort of move your mind stream and move your heart in the direction of love. And sometimes that's quite hard work. Sometimes you might spend the whole practice distracted or full of aversion or hatred or irritation. But don't be put off by that. When you notice that arising, it's like that's what you can come into relationship with, and you can hold that in a sphere of loving awareness. And that itself is the practice of metta. So in a way, you can lay bare whatever arises in your experience with a warm, kindly attention. And when you practice like that, there's no obstacle to meditation. Everything is an opportunity to dive more deeply into the realms of the human condition and the human heart. So just start by just feeling your contact with the ground beneath your body. Feel your legs and your feet on the ground. Your sit bones on the cushion or the chair. And as you breathe out, imagine that you can breathe down through the base of your posture, down into the earth beneath the building. And just feel the stillness and the stability of the ground beneath you. And then letting your spine rise up in its natural curves. And your head just balancing on top, so you're not needing to pull the body upright. The shoulders are soft and relaxed. You can release the jaw. You can soften all the muscles around your eyes, cheeks, mouth. And bring the attention down to your lower belly and just feel the breath down in your belly. And you can imagine this warm, kindly breath moving through your body. And rather than needing to generate metta, you can imagine just relaxing into metta that's all around you. As if you could just breathe it in through the body. The Metta Bhavana. So in the first stage, metta for ourselves. When you notice you're distracted, just come back to your body and just notice if you're gripping on somewhere in the body, and just bring this warm, kindly attention to that. Seeing if it can just release. Rather than feeling like the metta needs to come from within you, just seeing if you can relax and open up to the metta and the love that's all around you. moving to the second stage of the practice, bringing a good friend to mind. And again, when you get distracted, just notice if you're gripping through the mind or gripping through the body. And just bringing this kindly attention to that. Just this warm, loving awareness of that helps to loosen that gripping. And just imagining this warm, kindly awareness just extending out to your friends, bathing your good friend. Bringing to mind a neutral person. And just noticing, what are you dwelling upon? What are you cultivating with your thoughts and your emotional state? Just by bringing awareness to that, you're starting to shift that in a more skillful direction. Moving into the fourth stage of the practice and bringing to mind a difficult person. And seeing if you can keep your heart open rather than shutting down and defending. into the fifth and final stage of the practice, bringing to mind ourselves, the good friend, the neutral person, and the difficult person. And seeing if you can connect to a deeper love that's beyond your preferences. And just allow that love to radiate out to all beings. And now just stay in your meditation posture, but just release all your efforts to meditate and just sit. Good. Okay, so we'll have a little tea break now. So when you're ready, you can just make your way through into the lounge for a cup of tea. And then in the second half, I'm going to say a little bit more about spiritual death and letting go of what holds us back. And let's just keep this room. Oh no, actually, everyone will need to leave the room because we're going to chat online. We're going to have a little tea break with you and chat to you online if you want to stay with us and have your tea with us. Okay, so welcome back. So we're going to spend this half of the class, I'll say a little bit more about this next stage of the system of practice, and then we'll have another go at doing a meditation. So yeah, like I was saying in the first half, this next stage is called spiritual death. So there's integration, positive emotion, and then spiritual death. And like I was saying, in a way, you can't sort of force spiritual death. Spiritual death will sort of happen when you practice integration and positive emotion. You can sort of like set up the conditions for spiritual death to arise in a kind of wholesome way. But also spiritual death probably will just happen. It might not feel so spiritual, it might just feel more like a little death, but it will be happening all the time. So, yeah, one way to think about it is that the way that it would unfold if you're practicing integration and positive emotion is that you start to see what's holding you back, like it becomes really obvious, and you might have had that in the meditation practice. So you sit down to do the metta bhavana, and you have to have a certain level of awareness to notice that you're not doing the metta bhavana. Yeah, that actually does take a certain level of awareness. You've got to have the intention to do the metta bhavana, and then the awareness to notice that you're not doing the metta bhavana and you're doing something else with your mind, and actually what you're doing with your mind is driving you in quite the opposite direction of your intention of cultivating metta, yeah? So, I mean, I'm guessing that experience is familiar to all of you. It's very familiar to me. And in a way, that is like the sort of cremation ground. That is the area of spiritual death, because there's something that you need to let go of. And you might have noticed it in the first half where I was talking about, in the meditation, I was guiding you to notice when you were distracted, and then to feel into the body and to feel if there was anywhere where you were gripping. Because when we're distracted from meditation, we'll always be holding on in the body. That's what the distraction is. The distraction will always have a physical counterpart of holding, and you can sometimes even feel it in your mind. The distraction is like a gripping in your mind, and that holding blocks us off from reality, and it blocks us off from metta, and it blocks us off from awareness. And the way to overcome it is to turn directly towards it and to feel it really, really fully, and in that experience we bring awareness to it, and it can start to sort of release and sort of purify itself. You can't reach a state of concentration by just trying to push your distractions away. You might do actually for a period of time, but it won't sustain, and you'll probably get a headache. That's quite a common thing actually. People can say like, oh, I keep getting headaches when I meditate, and it's because they're trying too hard. So meditation has to have this sort of relaxed, attentive quality to it. And you've kind of got to come into relationship with what's holding you back, otherwise you're never going to overcome it. And that is like a mini spiritual death. So I don't know if you've had it in meditation where, well, it can be loads of different examples of this, but one example could be maybe you've fallen out with someone and you're running through an argument in your mind, and it's like there's this compulsion to get to the end of the argument or to think something through to its completion. Or you might have something that you need to prepare for, or something exciting even, or something anxiety provoking that you want to think through, and it's like you want to get to the end of the thought so that you've sort of nailed it. It's a spiritual death to just stop and not think it through to completion. That is a little spiritual death, because you're letting go of, what are you letting go of? In a way, you're letting go of the idea that you can think something through to its completion. You're letting go of the idea that if you could just find the perfect argument, if you could just get to the end of the do list, if you could just think through that strategy, then you can relax, then there'll be happiness, then you can get down to the meditation. But of course, it's a complete delusion, because what you're doing is you're cultivating distraction. And what will bring you true satisfaction is to cultivate awareness. And in order to cultivate awareness, you've got to be present with your experience, and thinking through something to its completion, which is not related to your experience, your direct experience, isn't going to bring you satisfaction. And it's really hard to do that, because we want to indulge our habits. We want to think those things through. We want to play those things out because they're familiar, and because we're quite invested in them. We're really invested in our views. We're really invested in our ideas of the world. And this is kind of like one of the sort of cruxes of Buddhist doctrine, in a way, which is saying that the reason that we suffer is because we're so concerned with bringing ourselves into the world in a particular way. I've got this idea of who I am, what I do, what I need to do, what I need in order to be me. And it's not even that conscious. I just bring myself into being, and then I bring myself into being, and then it's quite a lot of work to sort of maintain that, and to make sure that I get to do the things that I do, and I get to avoid the things that I don't want to do. And that also, like, maintaining that image of like, oh, I want to make sure that people like me, the right people like me, like I care about what those people think, but I don't really mind about those, and I haven't even noticed those ones. It's like that takes a lot of time and energy. And I've got an idea that if I get all of that right, then I'll be happy and then I'll be satisfied. But the tragic thing is that A, that won't be the case, B, it's impossible, and C, it's based on a complete delusion, because I don't exist in this fixed, separate way that I think I do. I don't need to spend all of that time trying to protect me, because I don't exist in such a fixed, separate way as I think I do. I'm deeply, deeply connected to all of you in this room. And it might, like, at the moment, I'm over here talking to all of you, and you're over there in your place listening. But we're having a communication, and what I say arises in dependence on how you're listening and your attention, and your ability to pay attention and to listen to me will affect what I say. So you're not like a passive receiver of this communication. We're co-creating this evening, even though you're coming to the Buddhist Center and you might feel like you're not co-creating this atmosphere, but you are. And so you're creating your experience through how you sit here, how you listen, how you pay attention, what you pay attention to. And that will affect me and how I communicate and what I say. So it's not, like, our experience is so much more sort of subtle and deeply, deeply connected, and we're constantly creating it so much more than we think we are. And so the idea that you're fixed and separate over there from me, and that you're not having an effect on this evening and how it unfolds, is a delusion. And yet, that is often how we experience the world. Like when I go onto the Central Line, I don't think, oh, I'm co-creating this atmosphere. I think, oh, the Central Line is a horrible place to be. It's really busy and everyone's really rude. But actually, I have had an experience of coming off a retreat and feeling in a really expansive, positive state of mind, going onto the tube and thinking like, wow, look at all of these beings. Look how different they all are. Look at their faces. Some of them look really sad. Some of them look confused. Some of them look happy. Some of them look like they're in love, you know, and they're not noticing anyone else around them. It's just those two on the tube, or, you know, and this person's got a dog. Oh, look at the dog. And like the dog's got a really different kind of consciousness to the human beings. Like, what's that about? And, you know, you can start to pay attention, and then you can actually even start to wish people well on the tube, you know, and bring a state of love to that space, which can feel so impersonal. And I've had like amazing communications with people on my journeys home from retreat. If you ever go on a retreat and you end up getting public transport home, like I've made loads of friends on trains. I don't know if I made a friend on the tube before, to be honest, but I've definitely had lots of really like beautiful communications on public transport on the way back from a retreat. And I don't think that's not just coincidence that I just happened to meet someone friendly. It's because I'm in a different state of mind, and I've let go a little bit of feeling like I'm just this fixed person moving through this world. I start to see that my states of mind, my states of heart are affecting the people around me, and I start to see that actually I'm having an effect in the world, and I've let go a little bit of that sense of separateness, and I've stepped a bit more into connection. And you can do this with people, but you can also do it with nature. Maitreya Bandhu has this lovely phrase when he talks about going on solitary retreat and you go for a walk, and as you sort of sensitise to your environment, you start to notice nature more, and then it's a bit like nature starts to notice you, and it's almost like the trees sort of turn towards you, and nature becomes more alive, and things which seem inanimate seem like they're vibrantly alive. And we can have this really materialist sort of view of the world, where we think that everything around us is sort of dead, or we can approach the world with a bit more of a sense of mystery and wonder and see what happens. And that is an act of spiritual death. It's an act of letting go of thinking that we know what our experience is, and opening up to the fact that actually life and death is much, much more mysterious than we know. Maybe much, much more mysterious than we'll ever know. And that's what spiritual death is. It's like, I really love this phrase of die before you die, because the great mystery of life is death. Like, we don't know what's on the other side of death. And at death, well, for me, I guess I wonder if at death we do sort of, in a sort of physical way, the body, the earth of the body and the water of the body, the elements of the body sort of rejoin the elements of the universe in a sort of visceral way. We let go, don't we, of the physical body. It's the sort of deepest letting go that we can imagine in life is death. And we can practice for death. In Buddhist doctrine, death is this opportunity to wake up, to sort of gain enlightenment. It's like your last opportunity in this life to gain enlightenment is the point of death, because it's like a liminal point where your consciousness becomes free from the body. So it's this place where death, the point of death, is a place where you can wake up. But in order to do that, you've got to train your mind to sort of be prepared for that point of death, so that you enter your death sort of consciously. And even, you know, I've got some friends that are losing their, for Alzheimer's and dementia, they're sort of losing those faculties. But even then, there'll still be this this stream of positive action and integration that will carry them through. Anyway, that's like a bit of an aside. But for us tonight, what we can think of is sort of dying before we die, and letting go of those things that hold us back. Yeah, and this sort of stage of spiritual death, I really like talking about it. Actually, I find it really, really exciting, and I find it quite hard to talk about as well because it's quite mysterious and it's easily misinterpreted. So I was trying to think of examples from my everyday experience of like sort of daily spiritual death, and we run these courses at the Buddhist Centre called like mindfulness courses, and we do them for stress and anxiety or depression or addiction. And as part of those courses, there's this thing called the 3-minute breathing space. Has anyone done it or heard of the 3-minute breathing space? Yeah. So the idea is that you're given this homework to do, and it's sort of like pausing in your day. You've got to try and do it something ridiculous like 5 times a day. Pause for 3 minutes, and like you connect to your breath, you listen to the sounds, and you just have like these 3 minutes of mindfulness in the middle of your day. I don't know if any of you who've heard of it have tried to do it, but I find it excruciatingly hard to do because I'll be in the middle of, like in the middle of my emails, I'll be feeling really productive, and when you get into that like rhythm of doing something and it's a bit adrenalized, and the thought of stopping is like slightly unbearable because there's like some kind of fear of just stopping, like I won't be able to start again, or I'll lose my rhythm or something like that. And I think pausing and doing nothing, or pausing and connecting to your breath for 3 minutes is like a spiritual death practice, because it's like my ego is driving me on to do and to achieve and to get stuff done, and to go against that is like a mini death. So if you want to practice this week spiritual death, I'd recommend choosing particular times of the day to just pause and just take 3 minutes just to connect to your breath and stop what you're doing. Another experience of spiritual death for me is doing nothing. Has anyone ever tried to sit down and do nothing for a period of time? Yeah? How did you find it? Yeah, you can say, Brandy. Yeah.
On retreats is easy, but at home is really difficult.
Why was it hard at home?
Because I feel kind of guilty of not doing something, or not feeling productive.
Yeah, so you feel like an impulse to do something. Yeah, and it's interesting, the kind of guilt of like, I guess we're quite conditioned, aren't we, to sort of do and to produce, and yeah, and I've had a similar experience of just trying to sit and do nothing, even if it's just for 10 minutes. It's like almost unbearable. I'd really recommend just trying it out. Just sit and look out the window or have a cup of tea and don't do anything else. What I notice is these uprisings of like, oh, I better call someone. Oh, I've got it, like desperately needing to reach my phone. Like, oh, I need to phone my mum. Like suddenly it's like really urgent. I need to phone my mum, and it hasn't been all week, And it's like, it's all right, Garavati. Like it's just 10 minutes. So it's like, and like what I feel is like my ego asserting itself through activity. Like I need to be someone in the world, and it's like when I drop that, when I let go of that, it's like almost like everything in my being is like, no, you need to be someone, and then you're like, no, it's okay. And then that experience of letting go is like, oh, this is so nice, like I don't need to be anyone. And then it's like, yes, you do. And it's like this impulsive habit. It's not conscious, it's like a habit. And that's what the Buddha would say. We're in a habit of pulling ourselves together and being someone in the world and getting stuff done. And it's like, and we think that is going to bring us satisfaction, but it doesn't. And in a way, we know it doesn't, because we're probably all quite good at doing that, or you might be inconsistently good at doing that, maybe if you're inconsistently good at doing that, you think if you could just be consistently good at doing that. But you do meet those people that are just like extremely productive and effective and never procrastinate, and they still don't seem that happy, So it doesn't mean that when you let go of this sort of limited, fixed sense of yourself that you'll just do nothing for the rest of your life. Although actually I think if you just did nothing for the rest of your life, it would actually be a really amazing way to live your life, to just do nothing. I mean, I'd find that really admirable. And it's like in London, do you ever get it? Like, you don't often meet people and you say, oh, hey, like, what have you been up to? And people are like, oh, nothing, Matt. People are like, I'm so busy, I've done this, I've done that. It's like, I once met up with my friend who's a musician, and it was really liberating. He was like, oh, I'm just not really doing anything, and I'm kind of waiting for something to happen, but like nothing's really happening. I was like, that's so cool. Like, that's so rare, isn't it? But that kind of doing nothing it's a creative place. It's not just like this passivity of doing nothing. It's a creative place where you're alive to life unfolding. And I think apologising is also an experience of spiritual death. So noticing that you've harmed someone, noticing that you haven't lived up to your expectations, that you've acted unskillfully, and knowing that you could do better, and then having the courage to face someone and to admit that and to apologise is also, well, can sometimes be a really big spiritual death. Like admitting that we were wrong, that we got it wrong. And also a liberation as well, because you can just let go of having to be someone that's always got to get it right, which is, as we all know, completely impossible. So all of these things are sort of like practices of spiritual death. So you can practice spiritual death in your everyday life, doing nothing, pausing, apologising, taking responsibility, getting to know yourself is also a practice of spiritual death, like realising that, well, for me, like, I'm not as nice as I want to be, or as I think I am. You know, sometimes I'm not very nice, and I want to be this really kind, loving person, but sometimes I'm not. That's a spiritual death, to really wake up to that. And in a strange way, kind of a relief, because I'm just human. Of course, I'm not going to be perfect. So we need a lot of awareness. There's this lovely, there are these lovely verses from the Dhammapada, which is this quite ancient Buddhist text. And there's a chapter called Mindfulness. And in that chapter, it opens up and it says, mindfulness is the way to the immortal. Unmindfulness, the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, whereas the unmindful are like the dead. So I'll say it again. Mindfulness is the way to the immortal. Unmindfulness, the way to death. Those who are mindful do not die, whereas the unmindful are like the dead. So those verses are quite poetic, and you might get a sense of what that means poetically. But looking at that from the perspective of spiritual death, it's saying that actually, if you're really, really aware, then life and death can sort of open up in a mysterious way. And if you're not aware, it's almost like you're deadening yourself. You're deadening yourself to experience. You might as well be dead. It's quite strong, isn't it? And it's saying those who are mindful do not die. So it's quite interesting that I'm talking about spiritual death. And it's saying those who are mindful do not die. So in order to, trying to think how I can unpack this. Yeah, when we become truly and fully aware, that awareness becomes an awareness of reality, and an awareness that we're constantly constructing our reality, and that reality that we construct isn't a reality. So when you construct a reality with yourself at the centre, that is a sort of false reality. And that reality is based on sort of a delusion that things are permanent and unchanging and pleasurable, that things should be pleasurable, things can be pinned down and permanent, and things are fixed, like you're a fixed entity. But actually, if we pay attention, if we cultivate awareness, what we notice is that our experience is constantly changing. We're constantly changing. everything's impermanent, like who we think we are, we're constantly bringing ourselves into being. We're coming into being based on lots of changing conditions. And reality is pleasant and painful. There's not just like a pleasant reality that we can inhabit. It's a mix. And that sort of, if we can turn towards that, so say let's take impermanence, if we can turn towards impermanence, and if we can sort of press on that point in reality, we can break through into an experience of the deathless. So these sort of, these are gateways to liberation. So they're traditional sort of Buddhist doctrine gateways. So by turning your mind towards impermanence, you can break through to something which is beyond life and death in this world right now. And I think really what that means is that you sort of lose the fear of death, and you realise that death isn't really an ending, that actually experience is constantly shifting and moving, and that death is just another experience. And in a way, that's what it means to die before you really die, is the thing that dies is the wrong view or the delusion that you're a fixed and separate entity. And that dies. And then what becomes the reality is reality with a capital R, which is that you see that you are part of the universe. You are in this constant state of flux, that you've got some autonomy in shaping how you come into being, and that you can be in deep, deep connection with the universe, and that there's no separation. And that's the state of the deathless, that's the state of enlightenment. And a way to get there is through cultivating integration and positive emotion and spiritual death. So looking for the opportunities to die before you die. So look for the opportunities in your life to stop. You know, when you feel really stressed and like you just don't have time to do anything, stop and pause. Like, what's going to happen? Maybe we don't know. If you feel really restless, see if you can just sit and do nothing and sit with that restlessness. Notice how it's changing. If you've done something that you feel like you could apologise for, take the step and apologise. Take risks in communication to deepen communication. Let there be an awkward silence rather than filling a gap. Or say hello to someone when you feel the need to avoid them. So all of those things are ways to cultivate spiritual death, to step into the unknown. And then when spiritual death arises, spiritual rebirth arises. And we'll talk about that next week. So then you're sort of reborn. And what you're reborn into, you don't really know what that is until you die. But my experience of that is you get reborn, you die to a sort of loneliness and isolation, and you get reborn into deep connection. I was just thinking, it sounds so religious, doesn't it? Spiritual death and spiritual rebirth, but I guess it is a bit religious in a way. So you let the old habits of gripping fall away through awareness. And what's on the other side of that gripping, you don't know, but there's something expansive to be discovered. How we can work with that in meditation is like what we were doing in the first half, is noticing when you're distracted, notice where you're gripping in the body. It's like you're holding on to your sense of yourself. And meditation threatens that sense of self because it loosens it up. So sometimes when you get to a point of depth and concentration, you might notice you suddenly get really distracted. Don't worry about that. Just come back and feel where there's gripping in the body and let it go. That's one method. Another method is to just see if you can be with the changiness of your experience. So rather than avoiding change or trying to pin things down and fix them, welcome change. And you can do that when you do the mindfulness of breathing. So feel the changingness of the breath, get curious about it. Can you stay with the constant unfolding of the breath? And then when you're distracted, well, notice the changiness of your mind. The mind can be concentrated and then it changes to distraction. When you notice you're distracted, suddenly there's a moment of awareness. So you're using the nature of your mind to notice the nature of reality and the nature of experience. So rather than getting caught up in the content of your mind, you're looking at the nature of your mind, which will point you in the direction of the nature of reality, which will point you in the direction of liberation. So in this sort of gripping is a gateway to liberation, and impermanence is a gateway to liberation. So you use those lenses and you look at your experience through those lenses, and as a way to feel a sense of relief and a sense of liberation. So spiritual death and spiritual rebirth is characterised by a feeling of relief. Sometimes spiritual death feels really horrible and uncomfortable at the time, but it leads to a feeling of relief. So with these meditation practices where you're looking at the gripping and you're looking at impermanence, these are insight practices. And you want to feel a sense of spaciousness and relief through practicing them. If you start to feel a bit destabilised, then just come back to metta or just come back to mindfulness of breathing. That's really important, because you need a certain level of integration and positive emotion to really turn towards impermanence. Otherwise it just feels really threatening, because it feels like real death rather than spiritual death. So when you do, in a moment we'll do this meditation on impermanence, looking at the changing nature of the breath, and you're seeing if you can just relax into that change. Let that change be a relief. Like, you don't need to pin everything down. Everything can be changing, and you can relax into that. You can be curious about that. And and in a way you can see what's on the other side of that. We don't stay with our experience long enough, do we, often, to know what's on the other side of that changingness. So start to pay attention in the meditation practice, and you can pay attention outside of meditation as well. It's said that we should be looking through these lenses all the time, looking through the lens of impermanence outside of meditation all the time. Look for this changingness. So let's have a go at doing that in meditation practice. So set yourselves up in your meditation posture. And we'll do a period of awareness of the breath. So let's start by just relaxing into that experience of the breath in the body. So the shoulders are dropping, and the chest broad and open. And your belly soft. And start to gather your attention around the breath as you feel it through your body. And see if when you get distracted, you can just include the breath and just noticing the changingness of your experience. So if you can stay with the breath, see if you can stay with the changingness of your breath. And you might just feel all the changing sensations as you breathe in and breathe out. And the breath is changing your body. And when you notice that you're distracted, just notice the changingness of your mind. The changing quality of your awareness, the changingness of your thoughts. And if you can stay with that changingness, what you can discover is a deeper sense of connection to life, a bigger perspective, and a wellspring of love. Which animates this changingness. By turning your mind towards impermanence, you can step through this gateway into a deeper sense of connection and compassion. So you can let your heart be tender and open as you feel this changingness of the breath, this preciousness of your life, this moment as it unfolds and unfolds and unfolds, inhale to exhale. Can you really experience what it is to be alive just now, this moment, this breath? And if you can feel the changing nature of your experience, that's the gateway to live deeply and fully. Seeing if you can just really welcome the changingness of your experience. for the last few minutes of the practice, just start to release your efforts, but just stay sitting. Let your mind relax. And I'll just recite a few more verses from the Dhammapada. All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with insight, one grows weary of suffering. This is the path to freedom. All conditioned things are painful. When one sees this with insight, one grows weary of suffering. This is the path to freedom. All things whatsoever are free of fixed and unchanging selfhood. When one sees this with insight, one grows weary of suffering. This is the path to freedom. Good. Okay, so that's the end of the evening. Very nice to spend the evening with you. So yeah, do come back next week. We're going to be looking at the final stage of this system of practice, spiritual rebirth. And it'll be the last week of the meditation challenge. So like Samantha Vajra was saying, it's not too late to join the challenge. There's online morning meditations each morning. There's a Saturday class. And we'll be continuing next week on Wednesday. So hopefully see you next week. Hope you have a good week, and I hope you have a good experience of spiritual death in between now and then. And you just leave quietly when you're ready, and you can put your mats and cushions to the sides of the room. And thanks for joining us online as well. We'll see you next week.